Hello, and welcome to Skynet Today's Last Week in AI podcast, where you can hear AI researchers chat about what's going on with AI. As usual, in this episode, we'll provide summaries and discussion of last week's most interesting AI news. You can also check out our Last Week in AI newsletter at lastweekin.ai for articles we did not cover in this episode, also the ones we did. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Sharon Zhou.
And I'm your other host, not yet Dr. Andrei Kurenkov. And for any regular listeners, you may have noticed we have not been putting out episodes that consistently lately. Apologies, there's a bit of a grad school crunch going on, but we'll do our best to keep them at least bi-weekly, if not weekly, for the next while. This week, we'll be talking about artificial intelligence helping us to talk to animals and helping us to protect India's tigers. We'll be talking about wearable AI sensors and how AI can be used to pilot among navigated crowd airspaces. We'll talk about facial recognition smartwatches, and we'll finish up with some cool art installations using robots and using Dall-E too.
Cool. Shall we dive right in?
Let's dive straight in. So first up, we have our applications and business stories, starting with, can artificial intelligence really help us talk to animals? So this article covers the Earth Species Project, which is a California nonprofit group that seeks to decode non-human communication using AI with basically machine learning. Founded in 2017, it's worked with major donors such as LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, and has now published its first scientific paper. So they have a very grand ambition and are now actually starting to publish some things. In particular, their first publication was this paper, Bio-CPP-Net, Automatic Bioacoustic Source Separation of Deep Neural Networks. Kind of a mouthful, but basically it's being able to detect individual animal speech or vocalization when there's maybe multiple animals making sounds. You can then differentiate which ones came from which is also done with human audio. It's known as the cocktail party problem. And they have grand ambitions to keep going and keep kind of doing little steps towards the ultimate goal of being able to sort of basically translate what animals are saying with the code to discover their language, and also along the way to help with conservation and help with biology research.
Really cool vision. And also there's so many good little steps in between towards it. Also great name of the project for ESP, understanding what the animal is saying or just intuiting it. Another project that they have also uses AI to create new animal calls, just completely new, unheard of ones, but also using specifically humpback whales as a test species. Just very interesting projects could fall under this vision and path.
Yeah, and this article also covers a couple of related efforts. So an associate professor at the University of Copenhagen, Elodie Breer, developed an algorithm that analyzes pig grunts to tell whether the animal is experiencing positive or negative emotions. And we actually covered that, I believe, some months back on the podcast, DeepSpeak. And there's also Project SETI, which is the Cetacean Translation Initiative that wants to translate communication between sperm whales. So it looks like, this is actually an undertaking by a few groups, and there's already been some progress. So it'd be super exciting to see if we can better understand what the animals are kind of saying.
And there's also some skepticism that experts have expressed. For example, the exact same sound that an animal might make might mean actually very different things in different contexts. And so you need to study the context to actually understand the meaning of what the animal is actually saying in that case. They just have a smaller repertoire of sounds than humans do. And so even though they have very complex, societies already. So, this basically points to potential opportunities. I think it is skepticism, but it's also potential opportunities to incorporate context in different ways into this prediction mechanism. So maybe, it's not just sound that these models can take in, it can also take in some kind of visual medium as well. And so I'm very excited to see where this goes, and it's probably animal specific. So yeah, I'm excited where that goes. I mean, humans also have homophones, but not to the same degree. And also we have language, which can express so many different concepts that animals may not have.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it would be a lot easier to, for instance, understand the basic emotion behind barking if you can also have a video of the dog barking and its kind of body language to supply that context. So I'm sure that probably people will do that eventually. And really excited as a fan of animals and kind of these efforts for animal conservation and generally kind of acknowledging the intelligence of our species. This would be really cool if it works out.
And on to our next article, which is about animals as well. It is how rangers are using AI to help protect India's tigers. So protecting India's tigers is actually a huge job. There are only 3,000 of them in 2018. It's actually, people are worried about the decline of these tigers. And actually estimating how many tigers there are is already a pretty challenging task of counting. And so India's National Tiger Conservation Authority, the NTCA, actually deployed a lot of camera traps in over 26,000 locations, and they took almost 35 million images of wildlife with those camera traps. And on top of that, researchers, they pretty much, covered thousands of kilometers on foot, just looking for signs of tigers, signs of their prey, to know where to be taking these photos and where to be setting up these camera traps, and also to be collecting information much more manually. And so now they're using AI to be able to, look through those camera trap images instead of humans looking through them to find tigers. And also now, actually, what's really interesting, I think, is they're using AI also to predict where rangers should go, like best routes to patrol to find tigers. And so I think that's also really interesting by analyzing the tiger population, how it moves, and in conjunction with the local topography.
Yeah, definitely. This is pretty cool. And the article does note that the chief forest conservator at the Tadabooba National Park has said that the tiger numbers in the state have increased from 312 to 400 over the last 4 years. It's actually, as with kind of conservation efforts, these are long-term efforts to kind of revive these populations or let them grow. And actually, there's another article that is related that we can just briefly mention from The Verge, how machine learning could help save threatened species from extinction, which covers how researchers at the Norwegian University of Science have trained an algorithm to predict the extinction risk of various species. In many cases, you may not even have enough data to know whether species are facing extinction because there's just not enough information or data. So now we can actually use machine learning to do that. So it's very cool how we can use machine learning to detect these patterns and then use that to empower humans ultimately to go out there and help these animals do well.
That's right. And on to our lightning round of articles. The first is Meta starts testing its latest AI chatbot, BlenderBot 3. And so Meta recently introduced a new AI chatbot called BlenderBot 3, and it's supposed to have a conversation with you, pretty much anyone, without becoming an asshole, which is actually a pretty big task, as you probably have ascertained from chatbots thrown into the wild. It's really been focused. Meta's been really focused on getting feedback about making sure their models are not responding in harmful ways.
Yeah, not replicating the Tay catastrophe that Microsoft had.
Or almost anything.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I know you're not on Twitter these days, Sharon, but there's already been some funny incidents where people talk to it about Facebook and Zuckerberg, and the bot said some spicy things.
Wow, that's good.
Anytime you release a bot in the wild, a chatbot, so far,
boundaries. People like to test boundaries for
people
AI.
find a way. Not quite as bad as previous instances of like outright racism, but definitely this one can say some spicy things, which has been kind of amusing.
Nice. Next article is AI startup Cerebras celebrated for chip triumph where others tried and failed. And so Cerebras, which is a huge company startup founded by Andrew Feldman, they actually just got a new display in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, just nearby here, for their WSE2, their second generation chip, which is, for achieving this decades-long quest to make a single chip from an entire silicon wafer, which is a very big deal. So congratulations to the Cerebras team.
Yeah, may finally be enough to convince me to go to the Computer History Museum here in Mountain View, which is super close to Stanford. And yet in my 7 years of living here, somehow I still have not made it. So now there's yet another reason for me to go, I guess. Onto our other lightning round stories, you can sort of generate art like Dall-E with TikTok's latest filter. So TikTok's latest filter is called AI Green Screen, and it lets you generate painterly style images based on words you input. And these images can then become the background of your TikTok videos, like if you had a green screen. It's not that sophisticated. These are fairly sort of blurry, kind of, not very sophisticated AI generations, but still basically Dall-E and TikTok, which seems like kind of a big deal.
That's a huge deal. I'm so excited. That's ultra mainstream. And I know AI has been fairly mainstream with TikTok's filters in general, but this is much more explicitly that. And so very exciting. Generative models, really, really take the stand there.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen Dall-E or any of the other kind of things that have gone mini viral, this is now gonna make pretty much everybody kind of be exposed to these generative things. Or not everybody, but a lot of people use TikTok, let's say.
TikTok is almost the definition of mainstream. So.
Yes. And also on that topic of AI image generation, we have open source rival for OpenAI's Dall-E runs on your graphics card. So the story is about how the startup Stability AI has announced the release of Stable Diffusion, which is an alternative to Dall-E 2, basically same kind of problem, different solution, that will be made public and available to various researchers and eventually open sourced. It will be released for free, and notably, it is designed such that it can run on a kind of normal high-powered computer with GPU instead of let's say a mini supercomputer or something like that, or basically very expensive compute that OpenAI's Dall-E 2 would require. So I think a lot of people have been very excited. And it is exciting. Stable Diffusion produces really, really pretty cool outputs, kind of getting close to Dall-E 2. So I'm definitely looking forward to this happening.
And this is a huge deal, by the way. This is absolutely enormous. And people are just saying that Stable Diffusion is just going to eat OpenAI and Google's lunch on Imagine. So it really is built on top of Imagine's technology, I would say, more so than Dall-E 2. I just want to give a shout out there to Imagine team when you look at the actual architecture of the thing. And it is funded by a hedge fund person who just made a lot of money on Wall Street and just really wanted to actually see this out in the wild and release the weights. And releasing the weights has many implications. One is that, anyone can access this and you can actually run it millions of times so that you can get exactly what you want. People are creating videos with this so that you can smoothly create videos, which you otherwise, one would be blocked by quota on OpenAI, but also it would be extremely expensive right now. And so OpenAI and Midjourney out there. So this is a very big deal. I'm very, very excited to see where this goes. And I'm excited to actually play with it. I've actually already seen some outputs from my roommate who got access. So excited to see this. Take Storm.
Yeah.
What an exciting time.
It just keeps going. This is really the year of text to image art and AI and these models. So can it go any further? I guess probably we'll have some more news soon. But yeah, super exciting. Moving on to our research and advancements section. First up, we have Wearable AI sensor supports personalized health data processing analysis. So this is covering the paper Intrinsically Stretchable Neuromorphic Devices for On-Body Processing of Health Data with AI. Pretty long title. And this is coming from a big collaboration of a whole bunch of people from the University of Chicago, the Tongji University in China, the Oregon National Library, and more. And as the title says, this kind of without the jargon is showing how flexible and stretchable computing chip that can be worn directly on your skin was created, and it can collect and analyze health data in real time using AI algorithms. It uses semiconductors and electrochemical transistors to collect the data from these biosensors. And it's distinctly different from something like a smartwatch, because a smartwatch ultimately is kind of not exactly on your skin. There's a bit of a gap, and you have some sensors. But here, because it's worn directly on the skin, you could possibly collect different sorts of data, possibly better data. And because it's stretchy, right, you can wear it on kind of anywhere on your arm. And as you move your arm, even though it's directly on top of your skin, it stretches and kind of can adapt, which was the major focus here. And there's a lot of details as to the material science of how they did this, how they made it run on a low amount of electricity. But the exciting part is they already have kind of a proof of concept of doing some sort of analysis in real time. So I think it looks really cool. And I would definitely want kind of this kind of stretchy, almost futuristic seeming sensor that you can just slap on your skin somewhere.
Yeah, very exciting. I mean, I know people have been talking about this for quite a bit and showing proofs of concept. So I'd like to see how far this really does go. I am excited to really see it. This will be precision medicine, right? If we can actually collect data like this, it'll be a big deal. So excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, definitely. They demonstrated one kind of main thing so far, which is training the device's machine learning algorithm. So it actually has built in these neuromorphic capabilities, meaning that it has, obviously not a GPU, but it has the capability to do some machine learning in a very sort of different way that is can be low power and can be a little more flexible. And they showed that this could be trained to analyze and classify ECG data, which is interesting. One for healthy ECG and four for unhealthy or abnormal signals. So that's just kind of a proof of concept. It's very early on, but this article does say that this research team is currently planning for new iterations of the chip, and hopefully this will go somewhere. Like I said, possibly it's just a prototype, but I want this kind of thing to
so you will will it into existence. You will complement it into existence.
I will do what I can. I will invest in early prototypes. I don't know why I'm so excited about it. I guess I like the idea of better health tracking and analysis.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it would be nice to have better things for like blood pressure in real time or other things that could help a lot of people.
Or I just want to know like what spikes my blood sugar too, like, and that's been up and coming in terms of those sensors and as minimally invasive as possible. So we'll see.
We will see.
And on to our next article, AI pilot can navigate crowded airspace. And so this is about a research done on using an AI pilot, which, enables some kind of autonomous aircraft to navigate a very crowded airspace, and that it can, safely avoid collisions. It can predict the intent of other aircrafts. It can track the aircraft and coordinate with those other aircraft's actions. It can also, and I think this is the most interesting piece, since other AI pilots, I've seen them do this before, but it can also communicate over the radio with pilots and air traffic controllers. And so it can actually be safe and socially compliant in its navigation. And this is very important because that's just as if it were a human pilot. It can actually communicate with the humans and other aircrafts. And so that's a big deal. So researchers actually trained this model on data that was collected at a couple airports, the Allegheny County Airport and the Pittsburgh Butler Regional Airport. And that included air traffic patterns, images of aircrafts, and the radio transmissions themselves. So I thought this was pretty cool work in terms of using both natural language processing, automatic speech recognition stuff, in addition to computer vision. And so combining those modalities into an AI that could actually be much more safely deployed. Of course, they haven't deployed anything. Everything is in simulation. So do take that part with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. One reason why is that one of the team members, Sebastian Schrerer, who is an associate research professor at the Robotics Institute at CMU, where this was done, he noted that this is the first AI pilot that works in the current airspace. So you don't need to change kind of how airports work to allow for specific new things for AI, exceptions to needing to use kind of visual signals or auditory signals or communicate using speech. Now, this could potentially just be integrated because it in many ways works or does some of the same things that human pilots do in terms of looking around and interacting via language. So, so far only a proof of concept in simulation, but this does seem like a nice step towards potentially making it possible to use more advanced AI pilots in real settings.
Yeah, so this is cool stuff, rolling it out, this multimodal stuff in ways I would have, never really imagined. So
yeah, it's almost like a little chatbot. Veto this direction of the conversation.
Okay,
it's just funny because it's a little like agent that mimics a pilot in terms of like looking around and talking like a pilot of a plane, which is
AI's really trying here. It's really trying. It's like doing radio transmissions, and it's going to do a little bit of Morse code here, a little bit of natural language there. It's going to say things like Charlie, instead of C. So it's gonna be weird.
Well, it's interesting because a member of a team actually said that they believe that they could eventually pass the Turing test with this. So they basically are
eventually is a key word here.
Yeah, but that's their goal, is to make this indistinguishable from a human pilot as far as sort of the communication channels. So it's ambitious, but seems like it could go somewhere. So let's see.
Cool. So on to our lightning round. First article is Hyundai announces $400 million AI Robotics Institute powered by Boston Dynamics. So Hyundai, which remember had acquired Boston Dynamics, or most recent acquirer of Boston Dynamics, actually announced that the robotics firm will form foundations of the Boston Dynamics AI Institute, which will be headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they will do AI and robotics research. And it'll be led by the Boston Dynamics founder, Mark Raybert, who was formerly the founding CEO, I believe.
Yeah, really cool. Boston Dynamics was an R&D kind of company for a long time, and now they're trying to commercialize their technology and doing less basic research. So now they can have it both ways, I guess. And the guy who led it all for decades can head the research. So I would say that's pretty exciting. And $400 million, that's pretty good funding.
Not horrible, but also less than how much money they've been passing around in general through acquisitions. Anyways, the next article is In Simulation of How Water Freezes, Artificial Intelligence Breaks the Ice. Ha ha ha. Very funny article title. So a team from Princeton has actually accurately simulated the initial steps of ice formation using AI, and this solves equations that govern the quantum behavior of individual atoms and molecules. And so this basically describes how water molecules transition into solid ice with quantum accuracy. And this level of accuracy, which previously people thought was actually impossible in terms of the amount of compute it would need, actually is now possible using deep neural networks. So this was published in PNAS, or the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences.
Yeah, very cool to see another interdisciplinary kind of work of applying machine learning to science. We've been saying more and more. And yeah, this was actually published in a journal, unlike most of AI research. So that's interesting. Next up, we have new algorithm aces university math course questions. So researchers from MIT and some other groups developed a machine learning model that can provide detailed solutions to university level mathematics problems in a few seconds at a human level. And the main idea was to cast the questions as a programming task and then solve these tasks using program synthesis. And of course, this was trained using a whole bunch of examples. And researchers also showed that the model can generate new math questions that are indistinguishable from human-generated questions. So yet more avenues for students to cheat using AI, I guess. Next up, we have the AI-powered swimmer is able to switch between different locomotory gaits adaptively to navigate toward any target location on its own. This is about how researchers from Santa Clara University in New Jersey and the University of Hong Kong have been able to successfully teach micro robots how to swim via deep reinforcement learning. And that means that they can now much better micro swim, it sounds like. So very, very tiny robots are now able to move around in smart ways because of AI, which is pretty fun. Sounds kind of fun to imagine.
Yes, and specifically in water. These things look kind of weird, but that's okay.
And on to our next section, policy and societal impacts, with our first article being facial recognition smartwatches to be used to monitor foreign offenders in the UK. So as the title suggests, migrants who have been convicted of a criminal offense will now be required to scan their faces up to 5 times a day using smartwatches installed with facial recognition technology under plans from the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice of the UK. So this is kind of like an ankle bracelet, but now you'll be installed with a smartwatch you can't remove, and you need to use it to check in. So those obliged to wear devices will need to complete periodic monitoring checks throughout the day by taking a photograph of themselves on a smartwatch. And their location will also be tracked 24/7 with GPS. And then, of course, as the title says, these photographs will be cross-checked against images of them in a database, and there will be a facial recognition thing. And if that fails, then a human will have to go and check if it looks good or not. So a little dystopian and kind of creepy, but possibly could be reasonable. The argument here is that this is a better alternative to custody, which means that you don't have to hold people, you can let them move around while still monitoring them. But as you might expect, there's been some pushback and criticism of this.
Of course, there is some criticism about this. Basically, campaigners are saying that 24-hour surveillance of asylum seekers basically breaches human rights and can have a pretty detrimental impact on their health and well-being. And just generally, electronic monitoring is intrusive technology, and it's technology for control, and it causes people to develop symptoms of anxiety, depression, suicide, ideation, and overall deterioration of mental health. So still not clear how long people will remain on monitoring, and they haven't provided any evidence to show why the electronic monitoring is necessary or demonstrated whether the tags actually make individuals comply with immigration rules better. And so people are saying this is a bit degrading, and there are better solutions out there. So it's understandable why there's some pushback on this. It definitely harks back to a bit of big brotheriness going on.
Yeah, and it's really not clear to me why this is needed instead of what people already use, which are GPS ankle monitors, where, for some cases, if you are an offender and you're released into the public, but, you maybe are a flight risk or something, you might be made to wear an ankle bracelet or ankle monitor that you can't remove, and it tracks your motion, famously seen in the movie Fast and Furious 2. So, I'm not sure what the point is of checking in via these photos. Like, if it's a watch you're wearing, then presumably it's always the same person. It's not very clear to me what facial recognition helps with. So it does seem like a power creep that probably doesn't seem to be justified to me in any reasonable way.
Well, hopefully they think about this a little bit more before following through and making this a permanent thing. And on to our next article. Man sues city of Chicago claiming its AI wrongly imprisoned him. So upon exoneration after nearly a year in jail, a resident of Chicago who's 65 years old named Michael Williams filed a lawsuit against the city on the grounds that a controversial AI program called ShotSpotter led to his evidence-less arrest. And we did cover ShotSpotter before. And as a reminder, ShotSpotter can listen to sounds and be able to tell whether it was a gunshot or not, and when that gunshot occurred. So basically, Williams was very much upset about being put in jail, incarcerated, and meanwhile, Chicago has been using ShotSpotter a lot, but this lawsuit could actually cause them to have to stop using ShotSpotter, and this is a big deal because the city actually did just renew its $33 million contract with this company, which is a huge contract. And so, this is actually a pretty controversial lawsuit going on right now.
Yeah, and according to Engadget, for the arrest, the police didn't even confirm a motive for Williams, who was accused of shooting a 25-year-old man. All they had was a soundless security video of a car with a ShotSpotter alert. So seemingly, very little evidence. And we've seen before that police have, in other cases, just used facial recognition matches without any other evidence. So definitely partially just sloppy police work, but definitely seems like it could be consequential. Another example where not just facial recognition, but now audio surveillance is a big deal. And in particular, because of how the police can use it. The ShotSpotter company did respond to this and claimed that ShotSpotter was not responsible for Michael Williams' arrest, that the arrest report never mentions ShotSpotter. But still, definitely a consequential case, and seemingly another case where the police messed up and how they use AI and pretty much, arrested an innocent person based on some spurious outputs.
Just comes to show how important the human in the loop is and not relying too much on these systems. And I think it both takes this adjustment period in terms of how we work with AI and how we use it, hopefully not to confirm our biases.
Yeah, definitely.
And on to our lightning round. AI contractors eyeing bigger role backed by CHIPS bill funds. So AI-backed research, advanced computing, and cybersecurity are now goals sprinkled throughout the new U.S. competition law authorizing $280 billion to advance the U.S. technological leadership globally. And so this is the CHIPS law, and it offers these opportunities for AI firms to meet federal needs. And so this includes AI components for R&D and organizational changes. And so the total funding, breakdown is the NSF, the National Science Foundation, that is, the DOE, the Department of Energy, and NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, are all getting billions and billions, if not tens of billions of dollars to help with key components for advancing AI, including creating directorate for critical technologies, supporting STEM education and AI scholarship for service, funding R&D and demonstration activities for AI, and establishing new standards for cutting edge industries. So big deal, lots of money coming from the government to fund AI.
Yeah, let's hope some of it goes to grad students.
$1 for you, sir. $1.
More scholarship and more grants.
$1. You will still be paid under minimum wage, but we'll call it a stipend. We'll
give you a scholarship, and then that'll go to university, and you'll get extra money.
Yes, it'll go to the university, not the professor, not you, the university. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, China drafts rules on use of self-driving vehicles for public transport. This is the next article. China is essentially creating new rules for self-driving, since they are starting to see that on the roads, as you've seen before. And the country's Ministry of Transportation actually has been drafting rules to regulate self-driving. And they said that China should adopt autonomous vehicles and passenger transport with care. And so the ministry will still encourage, the use of autonomous vehicles as taxis in easily controlled scenarios and low traffic situations. And that's according to the draft. So, and they're also seeking public advice, which is interesting. And so I'm very interested to see where this goes as China starts to maybe take the lead in deployment of these things, or at least it's easy to see how they could be taking the lead on deploying self-driving cars.
Exactly. And on that note, actually, our next article is Baidu's robotaxis don't need any human stuff in these parts of China. So Chinese tech company Baidu said on Monday that it's become the first robotaxi operator in China to obtain permits for selling rides with no human rider or staff member inside the vehicles. And we've had quite a few stories on new permits for testing and things like that. But I don't know that we've covered actually, commercializing robotaxi service, which has only been done in a few small test areas in the US. Cruise and Waymo are just now starting to do it in San Francisco. Whereas here, Baidu will have 2 suburban areas in Wuhan and Chongqing, 2 major Chinese cities, to test it as well. So yeah, as you said, it's definitely neck and neck, and it does seem very possible that China will take the lead. And our last lightning round story is US appeals court says AI cannot be a patent inventor. So according to the US Court of Appeals of the Federal Circuit, the Patent Act requires an inventor to be a natural person. So computer scientist Stephen Fowler has been kind of suing for his patents to be credited to an AI system, and that has failed. And so, yeah, after kind of quite a long legal process, right now the status quo is patents must be by people and not AI systems, which kind of seems to make sense to me. I never took this very seriously, but now this whole saga is concluded, it looks like.
Interesting. So I guess Stephen Fowler will have to be the inventor himself then.
I guess. Yeah.
It's interesting because I wonder how this will play out longer term. If AI can't, will it have, a pen name or, pseudonym? And yeah.
Yeah. And on to our last section, maybe our favorite section some days. It is the art and fun stuff section. Used to be fun and neat. We revised that name a bit. And first up, we have Robot Repeatedly Rearranges Remnants in the Round, which is kind of a weird artsy article title, but it is covering this art installation called Sisyphus, which is an art installation by artist Kachi Chan, who built this thing that features two scales of robots. There's kind of a bunch of smaller robots and one big robot arm that's, like 5-10 times the size. And, in keeping with the name Sisyphus, it's all about a sort of endless cycle where the small robots take these little blocks and build structures. And then the big robot is all mean and knocks them down perpetually. So there's this whole kind of ongoing construction and deconstruction cycle that goes on. So as you may imagine, it's a fairly kind of high-ish art installation, pretty abstract, but looking at the video and the image, which we will include in the description of the link, it's quite neat. It's really fun to see these little robots building their little structures and this big robot knocking them down. And I think it has a bit of a sort of emotional appeal just seeing all these little things that the little cute robots built being knocked down. What did you make of it, Sharon?
The video is very cinematic and high resolution. This is a high-end art installation. And Sisyphus is, from Greek mythology, the person who was doomed to push a rock up and then have it just, that rock roll down and continually have to push it up endlessly into eternity. So that's kind of what this is mimicking here, though with robots. And I like it. I think it's kind of cool that there are all these like mini robots pushing things back to what, the big robot has pushed against. So I think it looks great. I might not be as, emotionally connected as you are, Andre, to the art installation, but
I mean, it's cool. It's also just cool. We can say that. Yeah. And yeah, it's also, I think Sisyphus is one aspect, but it also has a bit of a David versus Goliath feel, where all these little robots are just continually working against the big robot. And obviously you can do some readings about society and things like that. But pretty cool art installation of robots. We've covered some previous art installation of robots as well. And it's always cool to see these art installations that utilize AI to make things that are sort of more alive, I would guess, kind of more interactive and more kind of evolving or unexpected in terms of what they do.
And on to our last article. Think your street needs a redesign? Ask an AI. And so in July, the artist Zach Katz actually fed Dall-E 2 Google Street View image of the block he lives in Brooklyn, New York. And he actually told it, he wanted to actually replace certain aspects of this Street View image. So specifically, instead of the pavement and parked cars, he, quote, wanted strikingly beautiful cobblestone European pedestrian promenade with an ornate stone water fountain and children playing. And Dall-E 2 was able to generate that for him, while while he masked out the components that he didn't like. So the cars and the street, and it's gorgeous. It actually looks really good. And he started, doing this for a lot of different Street View images, created a Twitter account called Better Streets AI. And he's just started creating more and more and more. And now he's getting hundreds of requests coming from all over the world, from Thailand to Canada, asking him to redesign streets with AI. And I really encourage you to go check all of these examples out. They look very, very cool. I really like the one definitely from, Brooklyn, New York, of Bogart Street, and it suddenly became very, very colorful. And I like how the article also comments on how his favorite one, Katz, the artist's favorite one, is just adding sidewalks to the street that definitely needed sidewalks and definitely needed people there, because people have been complaining about the lack of sidewalks for a while. Specifically, his parents had been complaining about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really like this project. Zach Katz, the artist here, is a former open street activist. So broadly, these uses of AI show how these streets could be more visually attractive, more kind of beneficial for humans rather than cars, things like that. And something that's really interesting is that now he is getting, via Twitter, a lot of people are asking him for this to be done to their area. And even like the mayor of a city in Wisconsin tweeted him and asked to reimagine some streets in his hometown. And according to Katz, council members and urban planners from all over the country seem to be very inspired by the images. So, and it makes a lot of sense. Instead of needing to do any sort of 3D design or Photoshop, or hire a designer or artist, this shows how you can use Dall-E in a very intuitive, straightforward way to show people these different versions of what these streets could be, and hopefully inspire people to at least consider ways that things could change. So very cool. Both from an artistic and aesthetic point of view, these images are just fun to look at, but also as a use of AI and art to potentially have social change.
Yes, I really like the quote from Katz where he said, "I think this is how it will lead to change, people with real decision-making power being influenced and inspired by these images." And they are very, inspirational. It's very clear how much more beautiful the street looks in the before and after. So I really do hope this leads to that change, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal for AI to be actually influencing people's lives positively. So very excited to see this project here.
Yeah. So do check out the Twitter, which we called out, and we also linked to. It already has almost 20,000 followers. Check it out, and looking forward to following this account and seeing future posts by it personally.
Maybe suggesting your own hometown, or just Stanford. No, I'm kidding. Stanford already looks pretty nice.
I think Stanford looks pretty nice. Yeah, that's fine.
AI will have trouble making it look more beautiful.
Yeah. Although it does make me think it could be fun to just not necessarily make things more beautiful, but just mess with photos of where you live. Just be like, take some random photo of a street in Stanford and add parade of clowns or something quite surreal, and be like, look at what's happening at Stanford.
The fake news begins. Oh no. That's what I was worried about with Stable Diffusion, but Andre is already way ahead of you. Really fun, quick fact. I was looking up Legos washed up on the seashore in in England because someone was telling me about how that happened. But I got something that looked very Dall-E generated. It was honestly a giant Lego man on the beach. And apparently that was a thing that happened in around 08 and 2008. And so, yeah, I was like, or is this Dall-E generated fake news already? I wasn't sure. So it's coming, unfortunately. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
Hopefully things are tamer, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Skynet Today's Last Week in AI podcast. You can find the articles we discussed here today and subscribe to our weekly newsletter with similar ones at lastweekin.ai.
We are super happy we can be back after a bit of a break. As usual, we will use this last bit of episode to beg for your reviews on Apple Podcasts. We always like to see what people think about it. It's nice to receive a 5 stars, but especially people write a review and tell us what they like or think about the podcast. That's always very exciting for us to see, so we appreciate it.
Yes, it makes us extra happy.
Oh, so happy. But really all that makes us happy also is just having you tune in and seeing that people actually listen. And that's kind of the main thing. So be sure to tune in and we'll do our best to keep making these podcast episodes regularly.